Welcome to the Saturday Slam and Jam. I'm your host, Andrew Schleck. Go to theathletic.com/NBA show and get The Athletic for $1 a month for 6 months. We have an Eastern Conference playoff preview for you guys today. We have Fred Katz, who covers the Knicks. We have Jared Weiss covering the Celtics. We have Eric Name covering the Bucks. So we have special guest Spike Eskin of the Rice to Ricky Sanchez podcast to preview all 4 series. We break down each series for you guys in the Eastern Conference. If you're looking for the Western Conference preview, that dropped on Friday with Nerder She Wrote. So please go tune into that. Hope you guys enjoy the podcast and the basketball. And without further ado, here is your Eastern Conference playoff preview. Okay, we're going to talk Knicks, Cavs, and the person that I want to talk to most about this series is my guy, Fred Katz. You can read him on The Athletic. He is our Knicks beat writer. He's also on the Tampering podcast. He's also just one of my favorite people. Fred, welcome to the show.
I think you've already established yourself as somebody who needs to know more people, but thank
you. Fred, so Cavs Knicks is probably one of the most anticipated first-round matchups in the East. How would you compare this Knicks team to the 2021 team that made the playoffs as the 4 seed and lost to Atlanta?
It's unquestionably better. You know, I wrote a preview of this series that went up on Thursday morning on the site, and my lead into the preview is that the days of the Gilbert Arenas Wizards and the Joe Johnson Hawks being perpetually stuck in the 4-5 matchup are over. Like, this is the reason this is an anticipated series, is because these are actually good teams. The Knicks are an actually good team. They were 3rd in offensive efficiency. That team a couple of years ago, the East was worse. That team won 41 games in a 72-game season. They were 24th in offensive efficiency. Their point guard was Elfrid Payton, who is now on the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. That was their starting point guard, to be clear, not just a point guard on the roster. This one has Jalen Brunson. Randall is better than ever. Quickly is so much better than he was. He was a rookie then. Now he is possibly going to win 6th man of the year. Grimes wasn't even on that team. Now he's the guy who's going to be guarding Donovan Mitchell. And this Cavs team, meanwhile, you look at the peripherals on it, and this is not your normal 4 seed, right? Not at all. Like,
right.
2nd in the league in net rating, 1st in the league in defense. They're one of only 3 teams, along with Philadelphia and Boston, that was top 10 in both offense and defense. And that can also often be an indicator over, okay, these are the real contenders, right? Like, these are really good teams. They've got 4 guys, Cleveland does, on that roster who have either been all-stars over the last 2 years in Garland, Mitchell, Allen, or are just like definitely going to be an all-star many, many, many times in Evan Mobley. So, I mean, that there's a whole ton of talent on that roster. I think the Knicks have really good, especially young talent. They're both well coached. Like, I think it's going to be a fun, especially if Randall is healthy. I think it's going to be a fun series. I really do. I think it's going to be good basketball.
I wanted to ask you about Randall because he sprained his ankle at the end of the season, missed the last 5 games. You reported that he's gone through parts of practice, but he hasn't gone through contact drills yet. We won't know his official status for game 1 until Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. If he missed a game or even is limited in his return, how do you think the Knicks will try to adjust?
Well, I could see them trying to play faster. They would likely have Obi Toppin in the starting lineup over Randall. That's who started those 5 games to close the season. Toppin is kind of a transition dynamo. That's his thing. He's going to want to leak out. He's, I really think, one of the only off-ball forwards in the entire league who actually affects the pace of a game when he goes in it. Normally the guys who are speeding up a game are ball handlers, right? They're not guys who are just going to be off the ball and big men, but Obi really does that. He loves to get out and run, and he's really good in transition. I think they would try to do that. I see them going small a lot more too. And that is going to be a really interesting challenge because, as we all know, Cleveland is massive. They've got those 2 7-footers and Allen and Mobley down low. And I think it's possible we're going to have to see Josh Hart guarding Evan Mobley for meaningful moments in this series. You know, when Randall was out over the last 5 games, you know, there were times when we saw Hart having to play significant minutes at the 4. We saw, especially when the game still mattered, you know, those last 3 games, the Knicks had already been locked into 5. So I kind of write everything that happened in those games off as just like, we can't analyze that to project anything that will happen in a playoff series. But you look at the way Tibbs was using Obi earlier, and he was using him kind of how he used Elfrid Payton on that team 2 years ago, or how he used Keith Bogans back in the day in Chicago, where Obi was starting. He was playing his first rotation for 7-8 minutes in the odd numbered quarters, the first and third, and then he wasn't coming back in. And I could see them going real small. I could see in sparse moments, if Mobley starts to kill them, I could see Jericho Sims all of a sudden coming off the bench and having to guard him. Tibbs has played Jericho Sims and Isaiah Hartenstein together before, even though those guys are both centers. I think it works defensively. Sims has really great foot speed. Offensively is where you're going to run into stuff because you're going to have spacing problems there. But he's done that during the regular season when Toppin was hurt earlier this year for about 15 games. He was running Sims and Hartenstein together with the bench unit. So I think they have some things that they're going to go to. But, I think they'd much rather have Julius Randle.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The Cavs are known for their defense, finishing the season number 1 in defense according to Cleaning the Glass. The Knicks, however, boast their second-ranked offense per this season per Cleaning the Glass. What are the key matchups on that end where New York needs to succeed in order to win this series?
So to me, this answer is my favorite part of the series because it gives you something for everyone. Because the casual fans are going to want to see Jalen Brunson versus Donovan Mitchell. And the really nerdy diehards who only care about the X's and O's and they watch the games on mute because the broadcasters just don't know enough. They want to see Brunson versus Donovan Mitchell. So I think that is going to be so much fun to watch. The last time that the Knicks played in Cleveland was at the end of March. It was only 2 weeks ago. And there's, again, not a ton to take away from that game. The Knicks were missing Randall. Cleveland was missing Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro. I imagine Okoro is going to be the primary defender on Brunson during a lot of this series. But you watch the fourth quarter of that game. Brunson ended up with 48 points in a win in that game. Mitchell ended up with 42 points. They were both absolutely phenomenal in that game.
Yep.
And the end of that game was the two of them trying to maneuver switches onto each other. Sometimes Brunson trying to get Garland. But the two of them trying to maneuver switches onto each other. And just two great players just battling it out. Two great scorers, great facilitators trying to battle it out. And what is more fun in a playoff series, close and late, than two great players actually going at each other? So often we see, KD and Giannis playing a playoff series, but Giannis is like guarding the weak side and KD's not hunting Giannis. So KD's never actually going up against Giannis. But I think these guys are going to try to go up against each other, and they're both fantastic players. And that will be, I think, incredibly fun from just a narrative standpoint, from the Donovan Mitchell Knicks stuff, from the Donovan Mitchell's a great player, Brunson's a great player, and it's fun to see great players go up against each other standpoint. And it's going to be super fun from an X's no standpoint because both those guys are phenomenal going one-on-one. They're great in pick and rolls. They've both had phenomenal seasons. They're both tremendously efficient. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the other teams try to combat that. Okay, how do the Cavaliers try to combat the Knicks running screen after screen at Okoro, trying to get him off of Brunson? How do the Knicks combat? Let's say they're putting the Cavs are putting Brunson in the back ends of pick and rolls. How are the Knicks going to try to combat that? We saw them try to trap Donovan Mitchell at times during late in that Cleveland game. But you know what Mitchell did? He just got rid of the basketball really quickly and made the right play and got open shots for his teammates. Well, his teammates make him pay. That is going to be, I just think that's going to be so much fun. As somebody who just loves the sport, I just think that's going to be really fun to watch for everybody. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really excited for this series. It's fun to watch great basketball players do awesome basketball things in basketball moments that matter.
Well, and your answer kind of leads into my next question, because I want to ask you about the other side of the ball, where the Knicks defense is ranked 19th on the season, according to Cleaning the Glass, which would be the lowest since Tibbs arrived in New York. Over the course of the season, what have been the major areas of concern for the Knicks on defense? And are the Cavs well set up to exploit those weaknesses?
Yeah, so something I think is going to be super interesting is how the Knicks do guarding in transition. a lot of their defensive problems throughout the year, especially this was more earlier in the year than lately, have stemmed from their ability to guard in transition. Now, the Knicks are really good at not turning the ball over. They were 5th in the league in turnover rate. The Cavs, in turn, are really good at forcing turnovers, 4th in the league in opponents' turnover rate in terms of forcing turnovers. That's going to be completely in opposition to each other, obviously. Someone's going to win that battle. If the Cavs win that battle and they're able to get steals, get deflections, get blocks, get out running, okay, are the Knicks going to be able to match up with them? Are the Knicks going to talk in transition? Being vocal in transition is not always something they do. Emmanuel Quickly is vocal in transition. Josh Hart is vocal in transition, but there are times where they get mismatched. The Cavs, meanwhile, average a whole ton of points off of turnovers too. They're like great at running after turnovers. They were top 5 in the league in points per possession after getting turnovers. The Knicks, leading up to the trade deadline, were 29th in defense after committing turnovers. So again, those two are in opposition. Since the trade deadline, when they acquired Josh Hart, who talks, they're 4th. So which version of the Knicks are we going to get? I think Mitchell Robinson's been a lot better in transition. I think Hart's been a big difference for them. I think Grimes is really learning on the go. It's only his 2nd year. Honestly, I think Randall missing 5 games probably helps those numbers too. He's one of the bigger transition defense culprits for sure. So I think there are a lot of things about that'll be really interesting to see if those hold up. But like, can the Knicks guard the Cavs after they turn it over? And will they turn it over a lot is going to be really interesting. And it's not just about the fast break, because what the Cavs are built offensively is to be able to kill you after you get a mismatch, right? If you get a small against Jared Allen, he's going to dunk on you. If you get a small, and he's not going to like post you up, but he's going to carve out space down low. They're going to throw him the ball when he's under the basket and he's going to dunk, right? Same thing with Evan Mobley. Or maybe Mobley's going to pass over somebody who's 6'2" because he's a really underrated passer. Mitchell is just going to go to town on like a big man if he picks him up. Same thing with Garland. So you want to pick up the right guys too. That is going to be super interesting to see how that goes. It's another great matchup within the matchup, I think.
So RJ Barrett has had an up and down 4th season. He's somewhat of a forgotten man on this Knicks roster. In fact, I don't even think we've talked about him at all in this preview. And yet he's still averaging 19, 5, and 3 with 5 free throws per game. Only 18 other players in the NBA hit that criteria. He is someone that the Knicks will probably have to turn to if Randall can't go, certainly. But what are your expectations for him in this series? And then just like holistically, where is he as far as like a core piece of the future for the Knicks?
Well, he kind of has to be a core piece because they did just give him a rookie extension that kicks him for next year, 4 years, $107 million. And unless, of course, they end up using him as kind of the main guy in a star trade or something like that this summer, I mean, I don't see them like actively trying to move on from him. He was obviously discussed in the Donovan Mitchell discussions last year. So if a many-time All-Star becomes available, Knicks are going to get in on that. And in that case, basically anybody is up for grabs. But I don't see them like actively trying to get off of RJ Barrett. That said, I don't know if the Knicks have to use RJ. If he's feeling it, then he's going to play. What's going to be really interesting to see as well is how the Knicks responds when Cleveland tries to trap Jalen Brunson. Brunson almost never fights the double team. When he gets double teamed, he takes a step or two back. He's not great at finding the roll man in those scenarios because he's just not huge. So what the Knicks will do is they'll send another guy up the opposite end of the court and Brunson will dump it off to them and that guy will go. And that guy will get kind of a 4-on-3. So that could be a wing, it could be a forward. It's someone who's a ball handler. And that guy will get a mini 4-on-3 in the break when they trap. That guy might often be RJ, especially if Julius Randle isn't playing. The question is going to be, how is he going to respond in those situations? Because one thing that he has struggled with, and very openly, by the way, he talks about it, is the ability to make reads when he's going at the basket. Okay, 3 guys collapsed in on me. I've noticed this guy on the wing. I can kick to him for a wide open 3. Or, okay, the big stepped up on me. I have the lob to Mitchell Robinson right open. Those sorts of things. He's struggled to make those reads, and sometimes he ends up just kind of throwing up shots out of triple teams that he doesn't need to do. And he's a little slow, maybe even a little predetermined on those plays. I think how he handles those situations will be really important to determine his playing time in this series. I also think, look, he shot 31% from three this year. He's shot 25% from three over the last 2.5 months.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any secret that Cleveland is going to be sagging off of him. The only thing I wonder about is to what degree. And I think the answer to that question is kind of up to RJ Barrett. If he knocks down his threes enough to make him think about it, guys will drift closer to him. And if it gets in his head and he gets really cold and he starts missing, like sometimes he does, it's going to be difficult to play him. And I shouldn't say it's going to be difficult to play him. It's going to be difficult to play him 30 minutes. It might be difficult to play him 25. And if Josh Hart is balling out, the difference between RJ and the other guys who are options there, Quickly, Hart, Grimes, is all three of those guys, have more faith defensively from Tom Thibodeau. And two of them are superior 3-point shooters. Hart's not really a 3-point shooter, but he is a very active cutter, super quick decision maker, quick twitch, going to the rim, passer, all that kind of stuff. Whereas RJ is more like, if he's not giving you those points, then he has to find other ways to contribute. So I'm very curious to see how it goes with RJ. If he gets really hot, he could be the guy who swings the series. Like, he is really strong and he's good going downhill and he's good getting to the line and he's very good at getting to the rim when he wants to get to the rim. And if he's able to do that and he's able to convert there and able to get to the line, he could be the guy who makes the difference for the Knicks, no question. But if he struggles when the Cavs are sagging off, or if he's not active, if he doesn't respond in some way, some activity, cutting, driving, setting screens, whatever, just making those shots, then I could see this being a problematic series for him.
Okay, Fred, it's time to make your pick. What's your pick for this Cavs Knicks series?
It's hard to say without knowing the health of Randall. I just don't see a way the Knicks can win if he's not somewhere close to the usual version of himself. I certainly don't see a way the Knicks can win if he doesn't play at all. I think the talent disparity is too much. I'm going to go Cavs in 7. I think these are both really good teams. But I think Cleveland's got 4 of the 6 best players in the series. And if Randall isn't play, or if Randall is too hobbled to look like himself, there's a chance Cleveland has 4 of the 5 best players in this series with just, that's a lot for Jalen Brunson's shoulder. It really is. So I'm going to say Cleveland, who I think is just like one of the best 2-way teams in the league. Argument that's a top 5 team in the NBA.
Go read Fred at The Athletic. You can listen to him on the Tampering Podcast, which is on this very podcast you're listening to. Drops every Tuesday. Fred, thanks so much for joining us. Okay, to preview this Celtics-Hawks series, we've got our guy Jared Weiss, who covers the Boston Celtics for The Athletic. Jared, what's up, man?
What is up? Just got back from Celtics practice where Jaylen Brown's hand is no longer completely falling apart, so they might actually be healthy.
Okay. Did he fess up to what really happened with the hand situation?
No, he hasn't talked yet. I think he's going to talk tomorrow, so we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, we got to get the real scoop on that. I'm not buying. Was it that he was working? What was the story that was told? It was that
he said he was watering his plants and knocked over a vase and then tried to pick it up, I guess, without looking, and didn't realize that he cut his hand.
Okay.
Which is possible. And
what was funny was
the first thing that people found after this came out was like a month earlier, he tweeted, just water your plants. So yeah. I think that was probably more figurative than literal, but it definitely makes it seem a little bit more plausible.
Oh my gosh. So the Celtics have not faced the Hawks in the playoffs since 2016 when they lost to Atlanta in 6 games. This season, Boston won all 3 matchups against Atlanta, including 2 games after Quinn Snyder became the head coach. Do the Hawks have any obvious advantages over the Celtics? Is there any reason to not expect a sweep in this series?
I would say, first off, there was 2 wins, and then the last game of the season was just an exhibition match that the score didn't matter.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think the Hawks will win 1 game in this series because they can expose Boston's offensive rebounding issues. They have a dynamic guard who can at least like get wherever he wants, and if Trey catches fire and he's he's able to spray it out and the other guys are catching fire. I mean, they're probably going to have at least one night where they're just shooting out of their minds and they're winning on the glass. So, one of the things that's really tricky for Boston is deciding whether to start Derek White or Rob Williams, because Rob Williams came back from knee surgery in middle December, and it took him a while until he was starting again. He started next to Al Horford for probably about like a month or two, I think. And then he got hurt and missed 3 or 4 weeks with a hamstring strain and then wasn't starting again after that. He started the last week of the season. He started their last 2 games against Toronto. So I don't know if that indicates that they're back towards playing their double big lineup. But against Clint Capella, it's like Rob Williams is really important. We just saw Clint Capella have 20 plus rebounds in that play-in game. He basically won the game on the offensive glass for them. So you really could use Rob out there, but then you don't have Derek White, who's probably your best defender against Trae Young, along with Marcus Smart. So there's a lot of push and pull there. So it'll be interesting to see how Missoula goes about it. I feel like Atlanta, we understand their lineup much more clearly than we do with Boston's.
So in your series preview, you compared Al Horford to a Pokemon, evolving each postseason, becoming a different player. What do you think makes Horford such a pivotal player for the Celtics' playoff hopes?
Well, his Pokemon trainer, obviously. So Horford, every single year, he is like a very finesse player in the regular season. And then playoffs come, and it's like he like sniffs some smelling salts and he just goes absolutely haywire. He's super physical. He's running on every single play. He's shooting better, although he shot great this year, so I don't know if he can shoot any better than that. But like every year, Horford has completely changed his best skills are different in the postseason than they are in the regular season. And he was able to sustain it last year through the first 3 rounds, kind of faded in the finals. So it's a big question mark of, and also before that year, he was playing for the Thunder, or really not playing for the Thunder. And so he had that huge layoff of tons of time to rest and recover, while this season he only had a couple months. So you do wonder if he's still going to be able to maintain that steam throughout the playoff run. But he also didn't play a ton this year. Like they sat him a lot. They rested him on back-to-backs. He barely, like, I don't know if he would have qualified for any awards this year. He kept his minutes relatively low, or his total minutes. So he probably should be sufficiently rested to continue to do the Horford Pokemon evolution like he does every single year. And when he does that, one, it allows them to not rely on Rob Williams to be their presence at the rim. It allows them to play 5 out. They're better offensively when they have a 5 out system. That's been the case for them all season long. Last year, they had a better rhythm finding Rob Williams for dunks and drop-offs and rolls and stuff like that. It's not happening a ton this year. He's getting most of his baskets on putbacks or some of the kind of dunker spot drop-offs. But like they tend to play better offensively with Horford out there and have a better balance. But obviously when Rob is out there, their defense has just been the best in the NBA over the last few months.
Now, did you have a specific Pokemon in mind when you compared Al to a Pokemon?
I always thought of him as like a Venusaur, Bulbasaur to Venusaur kind of evolution. Because I was more of a Smash Bros guy than a Pokemon guy, but like I remember in Smash Bros, Venusaur, his like big move was he would just like rumble on the ground and like make an earthquake happen. And Horford's a very like plodding ground bound player. Although maybe that's actually a bad example because in the playoffs he starts getting up in the air. So maybe he's acting more like a Charizard in the playoffs, really.
Because I actually did consult my local Pokemon expert. I gave him, the qualities about Al Horford. I said, who does this line up with? You got to let me know. He picked a Pokemon never heard of, Hariyama, who he says is big, wise, and strong. Those are some of the qualities I had given him. I actually found an article from 2016. Shout out to Jeremy Carl, who did Pokemon characters for every single Celtics player. And he picked Kangaskhan, which is a pretty cool name for Pokemon. Okay. So if we got any Pokemon heads out there, hey, let us know.
Let us know.
Who do you think Al Horford is?
You got any Pokecops out there?
I mean, Horford, if I had to pick anyone, I don't know if I'd pick a animalized version of a ruthless dictator warlord, but
he's also a kangaroo, and he has a baby in his pouch, symbolizing that he's a little bit older. He has a child.
Horford did have his son on the bench handing out towels in that Atlanta game, so
okay,
maybe it does work.
There we go.
Yeah,
I mean,
that might be a good one.
yeah, I mean Horford at his best, he's really a chancy. He's just giving out gifts to everybody, really.
Oh, there you go. There you go. I think we landed on it. That's pretty good. I like that one.
I want to have this conversation for 30 minutes.
Can we move on to Marcus Smart as a Pokemon? No. So for a veteran team.
I'm sorry. I
go
don't think I've ever been on a podcast where someone took a stupid joke I made in an article and extrapolated it out to an entire segment. So you deserve a Pod Emmy award for that, for sure, or a Webby award.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So for a veteran team like Boston, there's not a ton of question marks heading into the playoffs outside of Robert Williams' health. Head coach Joe Mazzulla has become somewhat of a target, however, being a first-time head coach in the playoffs. Do you think any of the criticism of Mazzulla during the regular seasons were they valid, and could they be relevant during the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a kernel of truth in coaching criticisms, but I think most people that complain about coaches don't really know what they're talking about because, like, one, there's so much layer to the coaching that we don't see, and two, as much as they might make a decision, it's like the players might not execute their decision as expected, and then, like, is it really fair to blame the coach every time they don't get exactly what they're supposed to out of their players? So, but I mean, Mazzulla did a good job. 57 wins is pretty decent, I would say. So I think there's a couple things. One, his timeout philosophy, which he has like a more coherent, structured, and detailed philosophy behind that. But he's always been kind of process and trust oriented, where it's like he wants to give his team a chance to work things out. And that was mostly a growth exercise over the course of the year. He has kind of tightened it up a little bit more as the season has gone on. In the playoffs, you're not really supposed to be learning lessons, right? It's like every game is pretty crucial. Maybe against Atlanta, you can afford it, but second round, they're probably facing Philadelphia. It's like, it's go time. You can't drop a game there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much more does he try to seize control over everything. And then also his offensive coaching style, he'll a lot of the time either not make a play call and he'll just literally just like conduct with his hands and like wave everybody to go and stuff like that, or he'll call a play set as they're bringing the ball down court and everybody has to kind of get aligned. It can slow things down a little bit. And so, Marcus Smart today actually talked about how their offense is really focused on finding cross matches. I mean, a lot of teams are doing that these days, and sometimes they play too fast and they actually don't identify the cross match they can create and target that. And so I think Joe doing that is a lot of him like making sure they find the cross match they want. And so I wonder, I have no idea, honestly, but I'm really curious to see, is that going to be better in the postseason when like more teams are trying to do that? Or is that going to slow down his team and take away their rhythm and their freedom and their flow and actually hinder them?
You mentioned, you gave us the update on Jaylen Brown, and we just talked about Robert Williams' health. What's the update on Marcus Smart? Because I know he had gotten somewhat of an injury at the end of the season. Is he good?
Yeah, he pinched a nerve in his neck. He said he like got like some whiplash or a hit to the neck against Philly late in March, I think, or was that beginning of April? Beginning of April, I think. And so he like couldn't turn his neck for a good week or so. He was sitting out of practice. He was just doing recovery work. He said today that he's close to 100%. And what was funny was right after that, he said, it's actually been a long time since I can even say that. So that's pretty good for me. Because if you think about it, Smart, it's like he tore his thumb diving for a loose ball right before the playoffs one time. It's like he's like flown out of the air and shattered everything in his body like 10 times during the playoff runs over the years. It's like he tends to be limping into the end of the season. And at least right now, I mean, the neck might be an issue, but like all of the lower body stuff seems to be okay. So I think he's in a pretty good spot.
So the Celtics are a much deeper team this year, and they have a pretty clear top 8. Outside of those top 8, so thinking about guys like Hauser, Muscala, Pritchard, Griffin, who do you think has the best chance to make a meaningful impact during this playoff run?
Well, so the funny thing is, number 8 isn't even set in stone. Grant Williams has been in and out of the rotation throughout the year. It seems like he's kind of really solidified his spot as the third big again. And in the playoffs, the matchups that they're going to have in the second and third rounds, it's like they really need Grant Williams. He's crucial against Embiid. He's crucial against Giannis. So he's probably going to be getting a ton of time anyway. So then after that, it comes down to Hauser or Blake Griffin, I think. Hauser, they get him out there. They get him running around screens. Some nights he hits 4 threes and he's really impactful, but then also gets targeted on the other end. I don't think he's much of a risk for mismatches against Atlanta because they don't have that many they don't really have wing scorers. They're going to take him off the dribble and rise up against him. And he's pretty good at staying in front of guys, but Trey is too quick for him. Murray probably can bully him and still get to his mid-range pull-up that he likes. And so, maybe those guys will try to go at Hauser if they're in the game at the same time. But he, generally the guys that really, do better against Hauser, Atlanta doesn't have a lot of those guys. And then Blake Griffin, just other end of the spectrum from like where Rob Williams is, where it's like Rob Williams is a high flying guy. He's, he's trying to play above the rim. Blake has been really good about being solid below the rim this year, making good decisions offensively and defensively. He's limited with his speed. So it's like, I don't know if he's going to be able to go up against Capella and Collins, who can play up there, but there's been a lot of times this year where they've gone to Blake to be kind of the, like the guy that kind of brings focus and intensity back to the team. And the last big game that he had for this team was actually in Atlanta a few weeks back, where he was diving for loose balls. He was making all these hustle plays and kind of reignited the team as they were starting to blow the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of Blake in this series.
I want to ask you about Jason Tatum. He kind of had a rough finals. And so I'm curious what you've seen just being around him and maybe what you think his mentality will be going into this particular playoff run. I think people give him a hard time and don't quite realize that he's still only 25 years old. Like, this is still a guy, and he just turned 25. Like, this is still a really young player that's still kind of finding himself in the league, even though he averaged it's like 38 and 5 over the course of the season. Like, he's still just ridiculous. But I'm just curious what your expectations for him kind of mentally are for this playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, the standards have been so high for him and Jaylen Brown because they were contending as soon as they got to the league, basically. So, they were in their third or fourth years and they were basically running the offense in a contender. And just, it's extremely rare that anyone's ever been able to pull that off. Like, those are like all-time greats were the ones that really could actually handle that pressure. And Tatum is, I mean, up until the finals last year, he was great. Really, the first few games of the finals, he had some really good games in there. The first game, Golden State took all of his shots away. He had like 10 or 11 assists and actually like was a huge part of why the Celtics won that game. That game 4 where they blew it, blew their chance in the fourth quarter. I think he was playing pretty well, if I remember correctly, up until that point. So like Tatum has put together most of the body of work. It just hasn't done it at the very highest level. A lot of guys, when they get to the finals, they don't do well the first time around. So Tatum, I think, I don't know if he was embarrassed or pissed off by how that went. He was frustrated because he was hurt and they were downplaying his wrist injury issues. And so I think he's looking at this as a chance for redemption, as a chance to prove himself. I think he's also a little annoyed that he was a front runner for MVP early on and then kind of faded in that conversation. He'll probably finish 4th or 5th, but like there's clearly a gap between him and those top 3 guys. So I think he's looking at this as his chance to be like, all those guys are in front of me, but Tatum might have to beat Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic to win the championship this year. So I think, especially if they face Denver in the finals, it's him being like, I can literally beat every single person ahead of me in the MVP race and tell everybody I'm the real MVP, and set himself up next season to be the front runner for MVP. So
hey,
I think
gotta catch them all with the MVP, top 5 MVP guys, right?
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
So, maybe he'll go full Charizard. He's a flamethrower from deep, and he's flying over everybody. He's a very pterodactyl-like frame to him, also. So,
yeah.
Although isn't there a pterodactyl Pokemon, right?
Yes.
I mean, there has to be. My kids have so many Pokemon cards. There just has to be.
Yes, it's Aerodactyl.
There
you go.
Aerodactyl.
There you
He's
go.
very aerodynamic. So, I mean, I think Tatum's in a good spot right now. He's been playing really well for the past few weeks after that post All-Star slump. His shot has been good. He's in a rhythm, getting to the rack. His mid-range game has been solid. And like he's always been good about stepping up to the moment and playing with more intensity. So, I mean, I think Tatum's going to be fine, and they're probably going to be really good because he's going to be at his best.
Okay, Jared, it's time to make a prediction. How many games are you giving the Hawks? You mentioned like a gentleman's sweep at the beginning of this. Is that your call?
I think I'll give them 1. I think they'll win like game 3 or 4 at home, and then probably get the floor wipe with them at game 5 back in Boston.
Yeah. I think that makes the most sense as well. Al?
I'll go 4.
Sweep!
Yeah, I don't believe in Hawks.
No.
But very impressive play and win on the road. I'll give them
It
that.
was. Got all the bounds. Got all the bounds in the play and win.
I mean, it was impressive in that they won the game. It wasn't impressive in that like Miami wasn't really playing. Like they weren't rebounding at all. I mean, honestly, Miami's defense wasn't terrible there, right? Like they got plenty of stops. They just didn't rebound any of them. And there were a few like long rebounds that kind of went out of their control, but they were going up against a team with like 4 guards, and Atlanta has like 4 guys that are taller than like the 4th tallest guy or the 4 on Miami. So that just seemed a little unfair.
Yeah. Go read Jared at The Athletic. You can listen to him on the Daily Ding. We're doing those shows live now on YouTube. So go check out all of those episodes. Jared, thanks so much for coming on. Okay, here to preview this Bucks series, we've got Eric Name of The Athletic. Eric, how's it going, man?
It's great. I'm excited for playoff basketball. I had to wait a week to actually be like a part of like the fun. So I'm excited that it's finally here.
The Bucks are facing the Heat in the first round this year. Last time this happened, the Bucks swept the Heat and won their first NBA championship since 1971. Is there any reason to think that this series will not be a sweep this time around?
So, oh man, I think over the years, Eric Spoelstra has defended Giannis better than anybody else. And I shouldn't say that like, oh, if you just have Eric Spoelstra, you're going to have a great defense against Giannis. Like, obviously it's a sprint scheme and they know what they're doing, but also that means the Heat have had a lot of good defenders over the year. They've had size on the wing. They've had big rim protectors. They've been able to kind of build the wall, build it strongly, make sure that they're disciplined and sound in their kind of schemes against Giannis. And that's always the big thing is do you have a plan against Giannis? And I would say the Heat have a plan. Now, this team compared to other versions of this Heat roster, maybe not as much size. Like they just don't have the type of guys that can really, take on the first bump against Giannis. Like we're talking about, when they eliminated the Bucks from the bubble, Jay Crowder was covering Giannis. Jay Crowder is now a Buck. So they just, I don't think have enough size. I think the Bucks are going to be very confident against this Heat team. I think they kind of cracked the code in 2021 when it was like, all right, we're just going to put Giannis on Jimmy Butler and we're going to put Brook Lopez on Bam Adebayo and we're going to play under on everything and dare those 2 guys to shoot as many threes as they want, shoot as many mid-range jumpers as they want. And if you do it and beat them, great, but neither of those guys showed the capability to do that with that type of size on them. With Brook Lopez on Bam, with Giannis on Jimmy Butler, they just couldn't really do it. So I don't think there's a ton of fear, but I do think when you're looking at the Heat and like potential matchups, the reason why I rank them as the least favorable option for the Bucks of the 4 teams that were in the play-in tournament in the East is it's going to be a pain in the ass. Like the Heat that's just who the Heat tend to be. Granted, there's been some bad moments during the play-in tournament for the Heat where they didn't look quite like the Heat of old, but I do think overall this is a Bucks team that'll be very confident against the Heat.
So one of the big questions for the Bucks is the status of Chris Middleton. Only played 8 games in his last game after re-aggravating his knee, and then he sat out the final 2 games of the season. Based on what you saw this season in those 33 games he played, what are your expectations for him in these playoffs? Do you feel like he was getting closer to regaining his form as the season went on?
So this is a question that Mike Budenholzer has taken from me. I don't know how many times at this point, but I'm very much of the belief that there is a difference between playing 35 regular season minutes and playing 35 playoff minutes. And one of those is going to be harder, and it's going to be the playoffs, and you're going to have to play through more contact. You're going to have more schemes up against you. And like that doesn't even touch the fact that when the Bucks went on their championship run, the games that they needed to win, Chris Middleton was playing 45 of the 80 of the 48 minutes. Like he's one of the guys that gets the playoff bump, right? He's one of the 3 most important players. He's the one that you never take off the floor with Giannis and Drew Holiday. That's kind of how you win tight playoff games. That is to me a massive gap to go from 35 regular season minutes to 45 playoff minutes. Like the gulf between it's just 10 minutes. I understand that. But the gulf between playoffs, regular season, and then those 10 minutes specifically, I think it's massive. And I think it's going to be a big question for the Bucks throughout this postseason. And Chris looked good at times. I think throughout this year, there's definitely moments where you're like, okay, yeah, that's Chris Middleton. Like he is back. He's doing his thing. He's able to move the way that he needs to. But there's also been times where it's like, yeah, Chris isn't quite right. So I think it's going to be a big question. I think the Bucks over this year have kind of gotten better at dealing with not having Chris around. Last year was a real problem, right? They had Chris the whole year. All of a sudden he goes down in the playoffs, and they just didn't have enough size on the wing against the Celtics because they didn't have a guy like Jay Crowder that they could throw in there. And then they just didn't have enough scoring. They weren't prepared for it. They didn't know what to do offensively. And I think one of the big storylines of the season has been how good Drew Holiday is offensively. He's just been fantastic for them this season. I don't know if I don't think he's going to get all NBA third team because guard is just loaded. But he had to be in those conversations. Like for people filling out their ballots, I had multiple people ask me like, hey, do you think Drew is worthy of that? And every time I said yes. Like to me, he's just been fantastic. The usage is up, the scoring's better. To me, he's just put together this great season. And a big part of it was Chris isn't here. Someone's got to, pick up the slack, and it ended up being Drew Holiday.
So you mentioned Jay Crowder. I wanted to ask you about him because he's entering the playoffs after only having played 18 games with this Bucks team. Do you feel like he has fully acclimated to his role on this team yet?
So I think this is a really difficult question because I was there in 2021 when the Bucks won a championship, and everyone remembers the Bucks traded for PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker transformed their defense, their toughness, all that stuff. PJ Tucker barely played once he got traded to Milwaukee. They sat him out forever because he had a bad calf. When the playoffs started, he was not in the starting lineup. He was not playing a massive role. Dante DiVincenzo was. Dante did that. And then Dante got hurt. And then they brought in PJ, and PJ took on a bigger role. So if you would have asked me before the 2021 playoffs, is PJ Tucker ready for a large role in the postseason? I would have said, probably not. He'll come off the bench. He'll do his thing. And because of that, I don't know that I can say Jay Crowder isn't ready for it, or Jay Crowder hasn't played enough, or Jay Crowder hasn't found enough rhythm, because vets like that, especially when they're asked to hit corner threes and defend hard and physically, they tend to be able to find their rhythm and tend to be able to just kind of pick up where they've left off in the past when, Jay Crowder was in the NBA Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks. Like those types of guys tend to be able to pick up that level. But I do think it is a question. I think he was ramping up nicely. I think he was in a spot where they were feeling good about it. And then he had some calf soreness, had to sit out for 5 games. And then it kind of felt like the ramp was going up, and then it had to go down for a little bit, and now it's going back up. So Jay's very confident. I think the team's very confident in him and his ability and what he's going to be able to do. But I think with him and with a lot of this team, that's the major question is, are they going to be ready for the playoffs when it comes around?
So Bud was pretty consistent with just playing 8 guys last year in the playoffs. This team is a little deeper, though, with Jay Crowder and Joe Ingles. How do you think Bud handles the rotations this playoffs?
Bud's getting annoyed with me asking that question as well. Because it's just clear, right? Like I think being a deep regular season team is good. That is how you put up 58 wins. That is how you put up, 60 wins the other year when the Bucks did that. Like that's how you have regular season success. Guys go out for a couple weeks. You have more guys that can fill in and do the thing. But it doesn't matter if you're 12 deep in the playoffs. It doesn't matter. You're not playing that many dudes. You're going to play 8, and when it really matters, you're going to play 7. So you have to make sure that those 7 and 8 are as good as possible. And I do think they have some really serious questions. When the Bucks played the Celtics and the Sixers back-to-back about 2 weeks ago, Pat Connaughton was not in the rotation. He was out. They had decided that it was going to be Jay Crowder, it was going to be Joe Ingles, it was going to be Wesley Matthews, it was going to be Grayson Allen. Those were going to be the 4 guys on the wing. And they got used different amounts in those 2 games, but those are going to be the guys. Pat Connaughton was on the outside looking in. As I've told Bucks fans, Pat Connaughton, I believe, is the only Buck of the modern era to receive a Mike Breen bang. Like, that's the type of clutch shot maker.
Yeah.
In the end, like, he had big moments in the finals. Like, that is a guy that you can 100% trust in the playoffs. And that's not to say Joe Ingles isn't. And that's not to say Jay Crowder isn't or Grayson Allen. That isn't to say anything bad about those guys. But I know Pat Connaughton is. And right now, Pat Connaughton's on the outside looking in because he has struggled to shoot this season. He's down much. He was flirting with 40% last year. Now it's like 34%. He hasn't been shooting the ball well. So I understand it. But ultimately, you're going to get into the spot where you got to pick your 8 guys for that series. And you have enough vets that, you know, one of those guys going to be on the outside looking in. And when you talk to people around the team, I do think there's a level of belief that, one, if you're a guy like Pat Connaughton or Bobby Portis that already has a championship and signed up to remain in Milwaukee, you know what the deal is. You know that, as Bobby Portis did, he sat out the whole Nets series, and then he came in and had a big NBA Finals. He was great in the Eastern Conference Finals. You know, Pat Connaughton plays a lot in one series, doesn't play as much in another. Those guys signed up for that. And then the guys that have been added, Jay Crowder, Joe Ingles, Grayson Allen, Javon Carter, all those dudes don't have rings, and they want one. So I think there's a belief internally that everyone knows what the end goal is. In some series I might play, in some series I might not. But that shit is a lot easier to say before you're in it and sitting on the bench. And I think that's really where it's going to get interesting, because I agree they probably have about 10 rotation guys. And there's going to need to be some cuts made. And some series might work better for other guys than it does for, you know, some regulars or whatever it might be. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch as the Bucks try to figure this out.
So you wrote a really interesting article this week about how Coach Bud uses timeouts, and specifically how he uses a timeout just before the 3-minute mark of the 4th quarter. For listeners who might not know, could you explain the significance of the 3-minute mark and then what makes the Bucks unique when it comes to calling a timeout at that point?
Sure. This is many people have referred to this as some real sicko shit. Well, that does tend to be the kind of basketball stuff that I'm into. So essentially in the NBA rule book, 74 pages long, there's a section on timing in scoring. And in that, there's a rule with a subsection and another subsection that tells you that in the final 3 minutes of a basketball game, you can only take 2 timeouts. So if you have 4 timeouts left, if you have 3 timeouts left, whatever, as soon as it hits the 3-minute mark, you have 2. That's it. There's no, oh, you know, I saved them and now I can take 5 timeouts in the final 3 minutes. No. Once it hits 3 minutes, you get 2. And that means there's always the option for coaches. And I shouldn't say always. Sometimes coaches use them more regularly, but a lot of coaches have the option of either using that timeout or losing that timeout, just watching it disappear into thin air because they decided not to call it. And over the years, I realized that Mike Budenholzer calls this timeout a lot. So I asked my friend Seth Partnow, like, hey, can you run some numbers and see if he actually calls this as much as I think he does? And the numbers confirmed it. Bud calls that timeout more than any other coach in the league. No one calls more timeouts in the 40 minute of the game than Mike Budenholzer. And once I had the numbers, I went to Bud, and honestly, I knew I thought it was going to be like a fun, nerdy, like 1,000-word, like throwaway story, right? Because I mean, this is some real nerd stuff. But what ended up happening was, you know, like Bud was telling me, oh yeah, and you know, in the final minute, I don't like to play with the timeout. I'd rather let the guys play. And, you know, like he tells me about this jump shot that Avery Johnson hit in 1998 in the Alamo Dome. And this is like a fundamental part of why he coaches the way that he does. And then, you know, he was like, oh, you should talk to Patrick St. Andrews, who runs our game card and tells me, you know, like he gets all the plays ready to go that we might use in that game. And we run through and shoot around. And like, it just, to me, I love the nerdy stuff. I love really going in there, but it was fun to find something so specific and so like just nerdy, and then kind of find out that if you really dig deep in there, you learn a lot about kind of how Mike Budenholzer thinks about the game, how he thinks about end of game situations, what he's trying to do. And honestly, to me, I kind of found a greater understanding of what they are trying to do. So hopefully if people read it, they can do that as well.
Yeah, there's a detail in there that I just never knew, which is that if your player is dribbling up the court with the intention to call a timeout once they cross half court, it benefits you to have them call that timeout at the top of the key because it allows you to take the ball out on either side of the court, which I just never knew. And in the article, you talk about the relative success of the Bucks in these after timeout situations over the last couple of seasons. I was wondering, do you know if that success has carried over to the playoffs in those after timeout situations?
Yeah, so overall they've been very good, but so like the main problem with timeouts overall as an offense is that you're giving the defense a chance to set up. And what makes efficient offense is, like the freedom, the creativity, the pace, going off of turnovers, whatever it may be. So offense is always worse coming out of a timeout. Like whatever the Bucks' normal offensive efficiency is not, it's going to be better than whatever it is out of a timeout. So I believe, and again, I would have to recheck these numbers, but I believe in the playoffs, that becomes even more dramatic, like where defenses like really lock it. It's not just like, okay, yeah, whatever, it's a timeout on a Tuesday in March. No, this is the NBA playoffs, man. Like we are really going to lock in. So the Bucks' relative success remains the same, but overall, like calling timeouts just brings offense down, which is why I wanted to like ask, right? Because Bud knows that letting your offense play through works well because he does it in the final minute of games. Mm-hmm. So why didn't he want to do it with 3 minutes? Like that, putting the puzzle pieces together in my brain was like a fun thing. But no, I did not know the thing about dribbling to the middle of the floor so you could call a sideline out of bounds play on either side. I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah. That's so funny. That's cool. Yeah, go check out Eric's piece. That's really interesting stuff. So looking ahead, if the Bucks win their first round series, they'll face the winner of Cleveland, New York. Do Bucks fans have a clear preference for their second round matchup? And is there one team that's a better matchup for Milwaukee?
I think the Bucks' only preference was not being someone that had to play the Celtics or the Sixers in the second round.
Yeah, for real.
That was all they cared about. And the easiest way to do that was obviously to be the number 1 seed and make those two teams potentially, we'll see how, series shake out, but those two teams should essentially play in the second round in the 2-3 matchup. So that was really Bucks fans' only preference, was don't play either of those two teams. Don't make it a situation where you have to beat the Sixers in the second round and the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Make it so that you only have to face one of those teams, and they were successful in that regard. As far as between those two teams, I tend to think that the Cavaliers defend Giannis particularly well. They have the large bodies, they have a lot of the things when you put it all together that can make Giannis struggle over the years. And, last year, essentially what Giannis said was like, after a Cavs game, he's like, their defense reminds me a lot of like Toronto and Miami. And I like, he said it and I just like stopped and I was like, those are the only two teams that have beat him in the playoffs when he's been a superstar. So, that might be notable. Like that might be something that, he's thinking about in his head. So I think that makes the Knicks a little bit easier matchup just because I don't think they have the people to defend Giannis. It's not something that they've really been able to do. But overall, I think there's a lot of confidence from Bucks fans that whether it's the Knicks, whether it's the Cavaliers, that's a series that they can win in the second round and get themselves to the Eastern Conference Finals to face the winner of the Sixers and the Celtics.
Okay, it's prediction time. What's your final prediction for Bucks Heat?
I think it's probably a gentleman's sweep. I think the Bucks probably get that done in 5. This is a team that they have a lot of confidence against, even though the Heat are absolutely going to be a pain. And really, they have some guys that can be physical with Giannis, and Eric Spoelstra is someone that is not afraid of getting his guys to do that. So in my mind, I think maybe there's a game in there where, the Bucks don't play well. Maybe it's the first game since they haven't played in 2 weeks and aren't going to have any rhythm. But I think overall that's a team that they really feel confident against. I think that sweep in 2021 has kind of, for a while, it was kind of like the boogeyman going to see the Heat in Miami, and oh my gosh, Eric Spoelstra, and then they stomped them. And then after that, I was just like, nah, we're good. Like, we're better than this team. They don't have anything for us. And I think we've seen a big change in their confidence since then.
Go check out all of Eric's work at The Athletic. Eric, thanks so much for coming on. I've got Spike Eskin, co-host of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. It's a podcast about the Sixers, and that's the team we're going to talk about right now. Spike, what's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I cannot wait for playoff basketball, man. I'm also I cover the Thunder, and so we're on pins and needles in OKC right now. We're recording this on Thursday evening. And,
yeah, I woke up to the score this morning, and my first text, honestly, was to Andrew Sharp, who predicted that the Pelicans would win the West. So that was my that was my first thought. And then I was talking to somebody at work about the Thunder, and I was like, they don't even have Chet yet. So so it's very exciting for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. So since being 12-12 early this season, the Sixers have closed the season going 42-16. Meanwhile, the Nets are 11-13 post All-Star break. These teams are clearly in different tiers in the East. Is there anything at all that scares you or worries you about this matchup?
I tried to think of something yesterday because we did our Nets preview, and the full disclosure, I work for WFAN in New York, and we are the flagship station of the Nets. So I've seen a good bit of Nets. Yeah. And this will come back. This is going to get clipped after the Sixers are down 3-2. But I can't think of something, like I think they're one of those teams sort of maybe in the way that the Sixers struggle with Toronto, in that they're athletic and sort of long. And you imagine in the first couple of games before Embiid figures it out, if they swarm him, they could get some turnovers. But I injury aside, I can't think of a way, like a realistic way that I can go through my head. We've seen the Sixers lose in unrealistic ways, but in a realistic way, I can't think of I can't think of a way that they lose to the Nets.
Yeah. So assuming that this is a relatively easy series for the Sixers, what should Sixers fans be watching for? Is there anything that you hope to see in this series?
So to me, the most important thing above all else is that Harden looked good. I'm not a Harden guy, admittedly, but he exceeded my expectations this year and played really well once he and Embiid started clicking, maybe, 30 games into the season or whatever. But then he started complaining about an Achilles, and he took some games off. And when he came back for the last 5 or 6 games, he didn't look good at all. Now, those games didn't matter, and he knew that. And no one likes a game that doesn't matter more than James to not try. So I think that the real key is, what does he look like? Because we can go through the roster and all that kind of stuff, but it really just comes down to, does he look right? Does Embiid look right? And if he looks right, then that is the thing that I'm watching for the most.
Yeah. And to kind of dive into Harden just a little bit, you can't ignore all the James Harden to the Rockets stuff that's just been floating around there in our faces since Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Is this like kind of in the consciousness of the Sixers fan base? And is there like a certain threshold that if they reach conference finals or whatever it is, that could just possibly vanish?
People don't seem all that worried about it.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because they're not worried about him leaving and that it wouldn't bother them that much, or they don't think it's really a possibility, or the other thing is, the last 5 years of Sixers basketball post rebuild have been so disappointing that people are a little bit numb,
Sure.
Just disappointing is a weird way to put it, but you know what I mean? Like with the way the expectations are. So I think it could happen. I think rather than putting a number on it in that they have to get to this game, I think the real thing is more of like a gut check thing, in the same way that you think, is this guy an all-star, is this guy a Hall of Famer? I think at the end of the season, whether that end in the second round, the conference finals, or the finals, you have to say to yourself, that team that beat them, are they a champ? Is that team a championship contender? And did the Sixers look like they could realistically beat that team in a 7-game series? Did they did they look like they could have won that series? And I think if the answer is yes, it's more than likely that Harden stays. If the answer is a question, then I think they're probably in trouble.
Where's your heart lie with that situation?
I think they'll like lose in 6 to Boston, and we'll talk ourselves into the series being closer than it actually was. I think is sort of where I am. I don't care if Harden leaves, in that I'm not attached to Harden. And I think Sixers fans in general have done this mental gymnastics in which everybody is forgetting Game 6 against Miami last year. That was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life from a playoff perspective. He looked like he was trying to lose. He looked like he was throwing the game. I've never seen anything like it. So, but the problem is that if he goes, it's not like you're creating cap room for yourself. You know, you're still stuck. So that's the real problem. I think that's what I'm worried about. But my gut says they lose in 6 to the Celtics. And this sounds like weird I'm not hoping for this, but you're always like a turned ankle away from being the favorite. And, Middleton isn't right. And, Tatum turns an ankle, or Brown, or Smart, or something. It's not like it's never happened before. So, and that could change the track of everything.
So this season started with a large number of Sixers fans wanting Doc Rivers gone after a very slow start. What's the current mood about Doc heading into the playoffs? Are there any current rotation questions that Sixers fans are particularly anxious about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mood is anti-Doc, but the mood was anti-Brett before that. And I think generally, on the pod, I'm not a coach guy. I'm not a ref guy. I don't like complaining about the coach. I don't like complaining about the refs. I think it's rare that you lose because of the coach or lose because of the refs. I think everyone who watches the Sixers is ready to obliterate Doc. I think the biggest questions are finding a way to make sure that Embiid or Harden is on the court at all times, and the other, Doc is famous for the all bench lineup, and the Sixers do not need all bench lineups. Doc seems dying to play either Dedmon or Harrell rather than Paul Reed.
Oh boy.
And that's been a sticking point as well. So I think all bench and the backup center are probably the two things that people are watching the most for Doc.
Is there a backup center that would make people more mad, whether it be Dedmon or Harrell?
Oh, Harrell. Oh my God.
Okay.
I am prone to hyperbole, but Harrell's the worst big man the Sixers have had since I started doing the podcast 10 years ago. Ben Simmons, I promise I won't make this too long. I can be verbose because I am a podcast host, but like the Sixers are playing Ben Simmons this year, and Ben Simmons is more scared to go to the rim than any player in the history of the NBA. He sees Harrell there and goes right to the rim 3 straight times. I swear it happened. You can go watch it. And I was like, oh, come on, man. Simmons wants to go at him. And I feel bad because everybody likes Harrell. He seems like a good guy, but he is cooked. That guy is cooked, So.
So there are several new players on the roster this season. How would you rank these new Sixers in terms of your confidence in them heading into the playoffs with PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, and Jalen, my hand is not broken, McDaniels?
So I love PJ Tucker. And I truly believe that one of the reasons they've been so much more resilient this year is just him being there. Like, I know it sounds like horse shit, but this is a team that would always crumble before and did not crumble this year. And he's there. So I believe in PJ Tucker, confident, number one. I would like to say McDaniels is 2 because I really enjoy him, but Melton has been really good. And so I would say Melton confident 2, McDaniels 3, but I want to believe in Jalen McDaniels.
Yeah. Okay. Last question before we get to our predictions.
Okay.
So early returns on the MVP vote suggest that Joel Embiid might get his first MVP this year.
Yeah.
Considering how central Embiid has been to this era of the Sixers and all that has come with this era, how satisfying would it be as a Sixers fan for Embiid to finally get this award?
It would be, as I know this sounds crazy, but for a Philadelphia sports fan, for me in particular, the only thing that would have felt more satisfying was when the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2018. I think Embiid winning the MVP, people keep calling me a loser for this. I think him winning the MVP would be a satisfaction level, maybe just under championship or right around there with it. This is just a player who people said wouldn't play, then he couldn't get healthy, and just the criticisms and the battle and the everything that comes along with it. It seems so implausible that he would win MVP, especially after coming in second twice, and he just kept getting better. He earned it too. So I would be incredibly satisfied. And I think the Sixers fans who have stuck throughout all of this feel a kinship with him because he was there the whole time too, almost the whole time. So I think it would be remarkably satisfying for everyone.
I don't think it's hyperbole because as somebody who's followed the Thunder and watched Westbrook get his in 2017, it did feel similar. I mean, we haven't won a championship here in Oklahoma City, but I think like the feelings that you like, the sports feelings that you have, I think like are probably pretty close. Like just to see your guy that has fought all these years for your franchise to finally like get this like pinnacle award. I think there is something to that.
I think the thing is, and this isn't to lessen what it means to be a fan of a team, and this is not a specific insult to the Sixers owners, but like the Sixers are owned by a couple of billionaires who don't live here. Like my dedication. And this is the problem I have with player turnover is I want to be dedicated to the players. And I want to feel something for them because they are people and they go through the struggle. So I know for a lot of things, it's like it's about the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. But for me, it's about the name on the back because those are the people. And Embiid is truly a person. Even the thing where a month ago with Shams, he was like, I don't even care who wins MVP. And then yesterday with Rachel Nichols, he's like, of course I care who wins MVP. Like that's, I know it's something to make fun of, but that is a very human thing to do when you think you might not win to go, but I don't even care. And then when you think you win, you're more honest about it. So I would be really, really happy for him.
Okay. Spike, give me your prediction. Sixers Nets, how many games?
5.
Okay.
I think the Sixers will like lose game 2. We will all panic.
Yeah.
It'll be an ugly game 1, lose game 2, and then they'll put it together. I don't see how the Nets have enough to make it last much longer than that. And game 7 is on my wife's birthday, and that would be a really tough podcast for me to have to do. So I need it to end in at the most 6. So
I can totally relate to that. Hey, go listen to the Rice to Ricky Sanchez podcast. I'm not a Sixers fan and I listen to it. And so you should go listen to this podcast. It's outrageously entertaining. The perspective that these guys have is so fun. So please go listen to that. Spike, thanks so much for coming on. Thank you so much to Spike and Fred and Jared and Eric for joining us on the podcast today. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we will read it on the podcast. Here's one from Raza Wurzel in Great Britain. 5 stars. Saturday Slam and Jam is the GOAT. I love the Saturday Slam and Jam and all the other athletic podcasts that come out. I listen to you guys every weekend and enjoy trying to guess the Andrew versus the Beat questions. Being a Rockets fan, I love the Wheel of Fandom because it allows you to shine the light on teams that aren't doing as well. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to listening to you guys again next week. P.S. We need a one-off of Alex versus the Beat. Wow, that's a good idea. Please from Leeds, England. Thank you so much for that review. Great idea. Andrew versus the Beat will be back next week. But with our big preview, we just didn't have time. There was just so much to get to. So yeah, look for Andrew versus the Beat next week. This next review comes from Bitchel Ritson in the United States. 5 stars. The Wheel of Justice, a slam. Lights. Alex Spears alone on a nearly bare stage. He sits at a black table set with a bottle of scotch and 2 empty glasses. Upstage, in the shadows, a large unknown object looms. Alex pours a shot of scotch and kicks back. He pours another. Andrew Schlecht enters. He and Alex look surprisingly identical. Alex pours Andrew a drink. How many 3-pointers has Steven Adams made in his career? Asks Alex. Andrew shakes his head. I don't know. How many? How many, Andrew? Shouts Alex. How many? How many? Andrew cowers. Stop it, he cries. No more trivia, please, I beg you. A buzzer sounds. Alex grins maniacally. He walks upstage to the looming object. It is the wheel. It glows with a menace. They bow before the wheel. Long may it rain. Alex stands and spins. They watch the spinning dial. Tension rises as the wheel slows to a stop. It lands on pistol. They look at each other. Alex walks to the table. He opens the drawer and removes a revolver. Oh my gosh. He turns and points it to Andrew, who offers a reassuring nod. Alex fires. Andrew collapses on stage, clutching his intestines, which are spilling out from the gaping hole in his abdomen. Slowly, the blood leaks across the floor, spelling the words Spurs. A tear falls from Alex's eye as he reads the words with horror. 5 stars, he says, and turns the gun on himself. Blackout. Oh my gosh. Thank you for leaving that review. Wow. We have some excellent Slam and Jam fan fiction going on here in that review. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the playoff basketball. Holy smokes, we got playoff basketball back. Enjoy it. And we will talk to you guys again next week.